Hello and welcome back to the video tutorial series for the Vignette Phone Crossbody bag. I'm Susanna and you are watching video 4 in my series for creating this sewing pattern. To make your own version of this bag and follow along as you sew, please visit holditpatterns.com linked below to purchase the pattern. This video covers the steps for making the bag exterior. We will begin with step 17 on page 6. Locate card slot's eye. Pin or clip right sides together. Using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, sew around the edges. Leave about a 3-inch opening at the bottom edge for turning. Trim the corner seam allowances close to the stitching, then turn right side out through the bottom opening. Gently push out the corners of the card slots with a blunt tool, such as a letter opener. Fold in and press the bottom opening even with the seam allowances. Top stitch 1/8 inch from the top edge. Use a fabric pen to draw a center line on the fabric 1 side of the card slots. This will be the stitching line to divide the card slots into 2 halves. Locate the slip pocket lining inner layer B. Fold in half, matching the side edges. Mark the right side top center with a fabric pen where creased. Repeat and mark the top center of the second B piece. Set one of the B pieces aside. On the remaining B piece, 1 1/4 inch from the top edge, mark the left and the right sides. Use this marked B piece for our next step. You will now need the card slot's eye we prepared in step 17. Center the card slots 1 1/4 inches below the top edge of the slip pocket lining inner layer B where marked. Pin in place. Use a 1/8 inch seam allowance to sew around the sides and bottom edge of the card slots. Sew along the center marked line, dividing the card slots in half. Be sure to backstitch at the beginning and at the end to reinforce. Set aside for now. Locate exterior top, front, back, A. 1 1/2 inches from the top edge, mark the left and right sides. Repeat with the second A piece. These markings will be important in step 33 later. You will now need 1 A piece. This will be on the front of the finished bag. Right sides together, pin or clip the bottom edge of A to the top edge of the slip pocket lining inner layer B with the card slots. Sew using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Press the seam allowance downward. Top stitch 1/8 inch below the seam joining A and B together. Then set aside this piece for now. Locate the remaining B piece and the prepared flap E. With the interior side of the flap facing up, center the flap at the top edge of B. The D-ring tabs are now sandwiched in between B and E. Pin or clip together. Sew using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Take the remaining exterior top, front back A piece. This will be on the back of the finished bag. Right sides together, pin or clip the bottom edge of A to the top edge of B. The flap and D-rings are now sandwiched between A and B. Sew using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Press the seam allowances downward. Top stitch 1/8 inch below the seam joining A and B, and then set aside for now. Locate 1 slip pocket exterior front back C piece. This piece will be visible on the front of the bag, partially covered by the flap. Mark the snap insertion point indicated on the pattern piece. I will now cover installing a heavy-duty snap in steps 26 through 29. If you are using a magnetic snap, skip ahead to step 30. Locate the slip pocket snap parts, the anvil with the raised side facing up, stud, snap post, and metal tool. You will also need your hammer, remaining ultra-firm stabilizer square, and a steady surface to work on. A leather hole punch is also helpful. Fit the snap post into the anvil. This is the side with the raised center, and the snap post stem needs to be facing up. Using a leather hole punch or seam ripper, punch out or cut a hole in the remaining square of ultra-firm stabilizer. Then fit the stabilizer square over top of the snap post. We will now punch out or cut out the hole that we marked on the slip pocket. I'm using my leather hole punch to punch out the snap placement marking. Working from the wrong side of the fabric, insert the snap post stem through the hole in the slip pocket exterior front C. The snap post stem is now visible on the right side of the slip pocket exterior, poking through the hole. Place the stud on top of the snap post. Fit the metal tool inside the stud. Hammer the metal tool firmly several times until the stud and snap post are securely connected. The heavy-duty snap is now installed in the slip pocket. Continue on now to step 31. I will now walk through page 7, step 30 for installing the magnetic snap. Locate the female magnetic snap half and remaining ultra-firm stabilizer square. Place the slip pocket exterior front C right side up. Just as we did in step 12, place the washer over the snap placement marking. Using your fabric pen, mark the two prong placement lines in the washer. With the sharp point of a seam ripper, carefully cut through the prong placement lines. Be sure to cut through all layers of fabric and interfacing. And again, to prevent the incision edges from unraveling, apply a few drops of liquid fabric sealant, such as Dritz Freycheck, and then allow to dry before moving on. Working from the right side of the fabric, push the prong feet of the female magnet half through the prepared incisions, and then also through the remaining ultra-firm stabilizer square. Insert the prongs through the hole in the washer, and then fold the prongs outward to secure. The magnetic snap is now installed in the slip pocket. Continue on to page 8, step 31. Locate slip pocket lining outer layer D and right sides together, pin or clip the top edge of D to the slip pocket exterior C, and this is the piece with the snap. So using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, turn right side out. Top stitch 1/8 inch below the top edge. Repeat steps 31 and 32 with the remaining C and D pieces. Locate the joined C and D pieces with the snap and the joined A and B pieces with the card slots. Place the top edge of the joined C and D slip pocket pieces 1 1/2 inches below the top edge of A where marked. Pin or clip. Keep the slip pocket positioned at these 1 1/2 inch markings for the next step. Before we move on to the next step, I just want to show you a quick tip. I like to tack these pieces in place at the very top edge of C, just so they don't shift for step 34. All I'm doing is basting all the pieces together at the very top edge of C, and I'm keeping these basting stitches within the seam allowance so they won't show on the finished project. Lift the slip pocket exterior front C piece up and over the exterior top, front, back A. And once again, we want to be sure to keep the top edge of the slip pocket at that 1.5 inch marking. Pin or clip the slip pocket lining outer layer and pocket lining inner layer along the sides and the bottom edge all the way around. Sew along the sides and the bottom edges using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I decided to film myself sewing the slip pocket D outer layer and the inner layer B together, since this step is just a bit different and I didn't want it to be confusing. So I am sewing all the way from the top seam allowances, following a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once we've sewn the outer and the inner slip pocket lining together, then you can place the slip pocket exterior, the C piece, back over top of the sewn slip pocket lining. And what we're working on now is the bag front. With the bag front finished, we're now going to repeat steps 33 and 34 with the remaining joined C piece and the D piece, and then the joined A and B pieces. So pinning or clipping, basting at the top edge like I did. Then, just as we did in step 34 for the bag front, sewing the slip pocket inner and outer lining together. Here's a view of the completed bag front and bag back at the end of step 34. Set them aside for now. Locate exterior base G, place right side up, and mark the center point of the notch. And so I'm doing this by folding my exterior base in half, matching the top and the bottom, and then marking the center where it's creased and the notch on both the left and the right side. And this will be helpful later in our bag construction. You will now need the bag front that we prepared in steps 33 and 34. This is the side with the snap. Move the slip pocket lining out of the way. And right sides together, pin or clip the bottom raw edge of the slip pocket exterior front C to one long raw edge of exterior base G. And keep the slip pocket lining out of the way for this step, and then sew using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Press the seam allowances toward the top of the bag, and then top stitch 1/8 inch above the seam joining C and G. The bag front is now sewn to the base. You will now need the bag back prepared in steps 33 and 34. This is the one with the flap attached to it. Right sides together, pin or clip the bottom raw edge of the slip pocket exterior back C to the remaining long raw edge of exterior base G. And remember to keep the slip pocket lining out of the way. Sew using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. The exterior base is now attached to the front and the back of the bag. So this is what the outside of our bag looks like at this point. Top stitch 1/8 inch above the seam joining C and G. Right sides together, pin or clip the bag front to the bag back. Match the top edges of the slip pockets and the seams joining the slip pocket exterior C to the exterior base G. What I like to do is first line up the slip pocket and clip that in place, and then line up where the slip pocket meets the base and clip that. Once I line up those seams on the front and back, then I go ahead and clip the remainder on the sides of the bag. Sew using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I've sewn the side edges here, and I just want to show you that the slip pocket lining does not get caught in those seam allowances at the bottom portion, just at the top. We're going to box the corners now at the base of the bag. To form the boxed corners, reach into the bag, with the reverse side of the bag facing you, and you're going to match the side seam with the bottom marking on the exterior base G, and then pin or clip the boxed corner. Repeat on the opposite side of the bag to box the other corner of the bag. The raw edges will not actually touch. What we're aiming for is matching that side seam with the bottom marking. And you'll see with yours, just as with mine, that the exterior base is just a tiny bit larger. When we sew and use our 1/2 inch seam allowance, we're going to take the seam allowance from the longer or the exterior base part of the bag. So I have the 2 bottom corners boxed and I am ready to sew with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And as you can see, I am using the 1/2 inch seam allowance is from the edge of G. So 1/2 inch from the raw edge of G, or raw edge of the exterior base. We're going to repeat now on the opposite side of the bag, sewing again a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and being sure to backstitch to reinforce. The boxed corners for the exterior are finished. Trim the seam allowance close to the stitching. Turn the bag right side out. Your vignette bag exterior is finished and you can set it aside for now. Join me in the next video as we create the lining and assemble our bag. Thanks for watching. Happy sewing!